Hi, Life Group leaders. I'm Ken Gaines, and I'm going to bring you the lesson today. We are going to be in session 9 of our book. The title of the session is Dreamer, and it comes from Genesis chapter 37. And this is a story that's very familiar to a lot of us. It's the first part of the story of Joseph and, what happens to him. So he's Jacob's favorite son. It's a fantastic story, very emotional, full of intrigue, and lots of rabbit trails to chase. So I'll give you some points to think about. This story is very, very eloquently told by Donny Osmond in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But today we're going to use the Bible's version to talk about it, if you're okay with that. I'll try to give you some points of discussion that we can use, but we want to make sure we capture the main point in our classes. And that's the same theme that's been running throughout the last several lessons that we've had, and that's God's divine will being done through a variety of people and events. As Vodi Bakum has said about this passage, this story is not about Joseph. It's about God's providence for Jacob's family in a way that only God can accomplish it. And so that's what we want to focus on. And if you have a little bit of ADD and only make it 3 or 4 minutes into these videos, I'd urge you to go to the last 3 or 4 minutes of it. And what I'm going to talk about there is probably the best thing that I could give you to take away to your class. Anyway, Joseph is Jacob's favorite son because he is the son of his old age, and he's favored by him for this reason. At the time of this story, Joseph's about 17 years old, and because he's favored, the rest of his brothers literally hate him. It's the word used in the Bible. But God works through Joseph by giving him the ability to have these prophetic dreams. And Joseph is more than happy to share a couple of these dreams with his brothers and the latter one with his father, because the dreams portray his brothers and then eventually his mother and father bowing down to him or being subservient to him. So, because of this, they hated him all the more, even though they didn't believe the dreams would come to pass. This really just ignited the fire the brothers had for disliking Joseph. Now, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers as they're tending sheep, and they're tending them in Shechem. So one point of discussion might be why Jacob would send Joseph to do this, and why were they in Shechem? Because Jacob and Joseph at the time are in Hebron, and Hebron is about 50 to 70 miles away from Shechem. Shechem's to the north of this area. It's going to be a 5 to 7 day round trip for Joseph at best, assuming he doesn't tarry anywhere or spend any time with his brothers. So it's a long time to be away. There could be a couple different reasons for this. First, the brothers were possibly that far away because this was very fertile ground, and so it would have been very good for the herd. And Jacob had purchased some of this land in this area back in chapter 33. And secondly, Jacob had a lot of reason to worry about his sons being up in this area because they were in an area where they had slaughtered Hamor and his son Shechem for defiling Dinah in chapter 34. So they were amongst many enemies that would just as soon see bad things happen to them. And so that's why possibly they were up in this area, and that's why Jacob had this concern, enough so that he would send Joseph on this week-long trip to go and check on them and bring word back to him. Joseph finds out that they're not in Shechem, but they've moved on to Dothan, which is another 15 miles north of Shechem. And he goes to Dothan, and as he approaches, his brothers can see him from a very long ways. So there's lots of fields, open area, and if you'll remember from the story, Joseph had this amazing multicolored coat. So he was very recognizable from a long ways off. So the brothers saw him coming, knew that it was him, recognized him, and so they began to plot to kill him because it was the perfect opportunity. As you know, they throw him into a pit. They later sell him to traders who are coming by on their way to Egypt. During this, both Reuben and Judah seem to seek to spare Joseph's life and do these very chivalrous acts. However, both of them do so in covert ways. They never openly contest the rest of their brothers in doing this act. They try to do it in a way where they're just being the sensible head here of a mob. But that's a good discussion point on whether we think that they should be commended for what they did in trying to spare his life, or whether or not they were acting cowardly and continuing to put their fear of their other brothers over the safety of their brother Joseph. The pit that Joseph was thrown into was likely a dry cistern, which there would have been many of those in that area. So imagine from a reality standpoint, Joseph sitting in this cistern. His brothers had thrown him down in there. He likely had a few bruises and some cuts from this rough handling. And listening to his brothers plot. Surely he could hear what they were saying, unless they had moved some distance away. I wonder if he was yelling at them in defense, and I think he probably was. And then when the traders came by, they're identified at different times as Ishmaelites or Midianites. We know Ishmael obviously begat the Ishmaelites, and Abraham begat the Midianites with his wife Keturah, back in Genesis chapter 25, if you want to refer to that. It's likely that some of both groups were traveling together in this caravan, or this could have been a group of people who were offspring of both of these groups who had intermarried and had children. And so that's why they're referred to as these two different groups at different times in the passage here. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. That's a fair payment for a young slave during that time. The traders then took Joseph to Egypt. So they were in Dothan. They're going to go to Egypt. They likely have Joseph shackled. He probably wasn't treated very well. This was a track of about 550 miles. So it would have taken them anywhere from 1 to 3 months to make it, depending on how fast they were traveling. So once there, Joseph, Jacob thinks he's dead because the brothers make up this story about him being killed by a wild animal, and he's sold to Potiphar. And so that was a lot of monologue from me to get back to this last 4 or 5 minutes that I want to tell you about. So again, our theme is God's divine will. Imagine Joseph's thoughts as that gavel comes down in Egypt and he walks over to Potiphar's side. Does he think that these dreams are ever going to come true at this point? Probably absolutely not. His brothers and Jacob absolutely don't think they're going to come true, if they ever did think they were going to come true. But this is how God works. He does the impossible. He weaves lives and events like none of us can. And think about this. We like to throw darts and vilify a lot of people in this story, right? Jacob did a bunch of stuff wrong that led to this. Joseph even, a little bit prideful maybe, beating his chest. Hey, one day you guys are going to all bow down to me. He did some things wrong. The brothers absolutely did some things wrong. Reuben and Judah, again, that's a good discussion point on what you think about them and what they did. However, we do see Judah later stand up for his brother Benjamin, and so maybe some retribution there. But um, think about this. If Jacob hadn't favored Joseph, his brothers would never have hated him like they did. And then if Joseph hadn't found them in a field so far from home, they would have never thrown him into the pit. And if Reuben and Judah had rebelled openly against their brothers and saved Joseph from this fate, then he would have never been sold to the traders. And if he'd have never been purchased by Potiphar, he would have never been in a position to save his family years later. And so God knows what he's doing. And that is the theme of the story. Again, that's what we are supposed to get out of it. And Romans 8:28 tells us, in all things he works for the good of those who love him. And to me, that's the real story of Joseph. And sometimes we forget about that because, again, we've heard this story from our childhood up, if you went to church as a child. And so it seems like it's always about Joseph and this incredible thing that happened to him and how he was the savior for his, for his family. And there's lots of again, instances, comparisons of what that is, what that looks like. But at the end of the day, what this story is really about is God working his will through a fantastic series of events that probably should have never happened, but it did, because that's the way God works. And so we need to be cognizant of that in our lives. And as we move forward in our lives, sometimes things that seem to be bad for us might not necessarily be that way. That's just how God is working through us to accomplish what he needs to. So if we're always looking towards him and not so much back in the mirror at us and the woes that we have, then I think we'll be able to serve him so much better. So that's what I have, and I hope these were some good points for you, and I hope you have a great class discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, every time we get one of these lessons that seem like it's so, milk level, man, it turns into meat real fast. And so hope you have a great class and a great week. Thank you.